thank you this morning for your presence. I pray now that you allow me to surrender myself fully to you, that you would have your good, pleasing, and perfect way in me, with me, and through me. Be my mouth when I speak, be my mind when I think, and anoint the ears of these your children, that all might hear what the Spirit has to say. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. Hallelujah. I thank God for the changing weather, though, because we do need some cool off right here. It's been too hot for it to be the fall or spring, or spring getting ready to come. So I thank Him for this last little bit of cool weather that He sent our way here in Florida. Amen. We're going to be continuing this morning in the book of 1 Samuel as we're dealing with the subject matter, God's grace through the Old Testament. And my subject for this morning is looks can be deceiving. Looks can be deceiving. The focus text is 1 Samuel 9:2 from the NIV. And it says, he had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. We left off last week looking at the end of Samuel's reign as the prophet and judge over Israel. Samuel has gotten to be an old man now, and he can no longer carry out the duties of traveling around to all the various cities to do the services of the judge that was expected of him to do. And we saw that Samuel got infected and affected by the parenting style of his spiritual mentor Eli, and Samuel ended up raising his boys the same way that Eli raised his boys, and they ended up not serving God. And the people said to to Samuel, your boys ain't ruling over us. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what they said to him. You've gotten old, your boys are jacked up, and they will not rule over us. The Bible told us that the entire nation came against Samuel and refused to allow him to choose a spiritual predecessor, and they decided that they wanted to be like all the other nations, and they wanted a king to rule over them. They didn't want a prophet, they didn't want a judge, they want nobody who was chosen by God, but they made up their minds that they wanted to be like everybody else, and they wanted a king. I said to us that they are about to walk into a new dimension that was not God's choosing for them, but it was one of their own choosing, and God gave them the freedom to choose. God has always been and will always be pro-choice. That might not be popular, but I'm going to say it again. God has always been and will always be pro-choice. Now, I don't mean that from the political perspective like the Democratic Party, but from a biblical and spiritual perspective, God is also pro-life. God has always been and will always be pro-life. Amen. And I don't mean that from the Republican Party perspective, but rather from a spiritual and biblical perspective. Now somebody might say, well, Pastor, how can God be on both sides of the equation? Pastor, I believe you have to be one or the other. You got to be pro-life or you got to be pro-choice. You can't be both. Well, from a human disposition, that might be the case. But from God's disposition, He is both. He is pro-life in that He puts the highest value on life in the womb and on life, period. It was instituted as one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Shall not commit murder. And that word kill or murder is the unlawful taking of an innocent life. And at the same time, he puts the highest value on the right of mankind to choose to do right or wrong. From the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, God established his covenant with mankind and gave him the right to choose whether he would obey God or not obey God, and allowed him to choose to eat the forbidden fruit. Didn't stop him. So God gives us the right to choose even when we want to choose wrong. He gives us the right to choose. So it was with the nation of Israel. God had Samuel to tell them what a tyrant their king would be. But he still allowed them the freedom to choose to reject him and choose a man or embrace the tyrant for a king. Let's look back at a portion of the conversation that God told Samuel to have with them, and this will give us the jump off from where we're going to go this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 10 through 14, and it says, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will do. He will make your sons, he will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses. In other words, he's going to treat your sons like an animal. And they will run in front of his chariots. So he will assign, some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, all of it belonging to the king. Yes, it is. And still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. And then on verse 19 it says, in that same chapter, but the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. A complete rejection of God. Because before, God was going out fighting their battles. But they are now saying, we no longer want to be under submission to God. We now want to be like all the other nations, and we want a king. So now let's look at some of the events that took place under the leadership of the first king that was chosen by the people. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, and I'm reading the NIV this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, and it reads, there was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man without equal among the Israelites, a head taller than any of the others. And stop there for a minute. We have here a description of this young man named Saul. First of all, he comes from a good Jewish stock, the tribe of Benjamin. If you remember Benjamin was the baby brother to Joseph, the son of Jacob. And we are given his lineage here, probably because the writer of this book was addressing a Jewish audience, and he wanted to identify for his audience that this young man that they were choosing was from a good Jewish home, a good Jewish background. He had strong Jewish roots, and it made them look good or feel good that they were choosing somebody who they knew were pure Jew. Amen. Wasn't no mixture up in him. They named his father, named some other folk in the lineage, and he came from the tribe of Benjamin. So he's a true Israelite. Then the author gives us a physical description, probably because it mattered a great deal to the Jews that the person who would be chosen as their king should be someone who could well represent Israel in the presence of the other nations. They wanted somebody who had an appearance that would cause the other nations to look in awe for them or of them. So they looked at this young man, pure Israelite heritage, tall and handsome in physique, and this is the man that they will choose as their king. It is said that Saul may have been close to 7 feet tall, because it said he was a head taller than anyone else. And when I read that, I was like, well, okay, how tall might he have been? So I took the liberty to go in there, and I got a ruler, and I measured the distance from under my chin to the top of my head, and it's about 9 inches. So he's at least 9 inches taller than anybody else. So there was probably at least some folk that were 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", okay? But he had 9 inches over everybody else, so he was probably close to 7 feet tall. He would have made a good NBA player. Yeah. So by mere human standards, it says that Saul was an impressive young man and had no equal. The New King James Version says it like this in 1 Samuel 9:2. And he had a choice and handsome son whose name was Saul. There was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. Wow. Saul was all that and a cup of tea. He was all that and a bag of chips. He was 2 snaps up and a circle. He was better than an RC Cola with peanuts in it. Oh yeah. Saul had it going on. Oh, yeah. The young people look like, RC Cola? What is an RC Cola? You got to be over 40 to know what an RC Cola was. And you might need to be over 50 to know what it was with peanuts in it. That was the joy of the day. If you were able to get you a RC Cola and pour some salted peanuts in it, man, you was in heaven back in the day. So Saul was all of that. And whatever else you want to use as a metaphor, he had it all going on. But I say to you this morning, my brothers and sisters, that looks can be deceiving. Amen. Amen. There are several occasions in the Bible where it speaks about how God judges versus how man judges. And just to illustrate this, while we're on the subject, I want to do a fast forward, and I'll come back to this passage in a minute. But we will see in a few moments how God's prophecy concerning their choice for king will come true. But I want to take just a moment here, an opportunity to show the difference in how God will choose their next king versus how they chose their first king. When all is said and done, Saul nearly ruins the nation of Israel. God then tells Samuel how to go about selecting the next king. Turn with me, if you would, to 1 Samuel chapter 16. We're going to come back there, but I wanted to just make this point this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 16. I'm going to read verses 1 through 13. You have it, say amen.
Amen.
And it reads, "The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you." And the heifer was an animal. You weren't talking about a fast woman. I'm just saying. Some folks might not know what a heifer is. The only heifer they've ever heard is the heifer that their mama talked about. That heifer. So it is a female cow.
Amen.
Amen. Samuel did what the Lord said, and when he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." So Eliab must have been a tall, good-looking dude too. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse had Shammah pass by. But Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. But Samuel said unto him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They're still the youngest," Jesse answered. "But he's tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." Verse 12. So he went and had him brought in. He was ruddy, with a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. He is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power. Samuel then went to Ramah. Now, the Bible says here in verse 12 that he was ruddy. It is the Hebrew term Admoni, Adomoniy, and it means reddish of the hair or the complexion. So this tells me that David was probably considered an oddball. He either had red hair or he was reddish in complexion, and he didn't look like the rest of the brothers. I heard it told sometime back that there was rumored throughout history that David may not have been Jesse's son. Yeah. That it may have been that Jesse's wife threw a hook and had an affair, because David didn't look like the rest of Jesse's boys. And perhaps that was why he had been given the lowest of jobs, to go out and tend the sheep. And he was so unlikely to be chosen. He was so unlikely to be thought of to be anything by his father that he didn't even bother to invite him to the dinner.
Yes. Yes.
All the other boys
Yes.
came to the dinner.
Yes.
He didn't even bother to bring David in, because he was so convinced, I know it can't be that joker. That joker doesn't even look like me.
My. Look at God.
He was the oddball in the family. And again, I say to you that looks can be deceiving. God chooses the oddball child and anoints him as king. I don't know about you all, but I know what it feels like to be the oddball. Amen. I've had that feeling throughout my lifetime, even